Well, hello and welcome back to GearHeadGeeks. And in this chapter of our tools and the art of motorcycle maintenance, we are going to be running through a basic list of meters, testers, gauges that you could possibly use in your home shop, or if you're just repairing your bike, or you're going to be a pro, or you're whatever, however you want to work on motorcycles, cars, vehicles, and whatnot. So anyway, it's basically a list of, and not in too great a detail at this point, of devices that you could purchase, that you might want to purchase. And again, we're not going to go into a great deal on how to use them or give a basic idea. It's just a big list, and that will help. At least you can look at it and go, oh yeah, maybe I need one of those. Oh, I don't need that crap. Whatever it is. So I'm going to go through the list, and we'll just take a brief explanation of what they are. But in the future, we will be going through and going into detail some of the more complicated ones. So enjoy. So next, let's just talk about compression testers. What a compression tester is something that you screw into the spark plug hole, and you will, at that point, check the compression of your engine. The manufacturers have a specific range for most of them, but if you're restoring an old motorcycle or something, you may not have that, or you just want to find out if the engine will run or not. So the tool you need to do that is called a compression tester. And let me aim down here, and we've got a couple flavors. This first one is a Mac, which I bought a long time ago, and if you look, you can see that you screw it into a 14 millimeter spark plug hole, and it also has facilities for 18 millimeters. So for a car, you can use this on either the 14 or the 18. And what you do is screw that in, and then you turn the engine over. I'll explain a little bit more about that. I have another one here. This is an old Sears that I got a long time ago. And it's funny, all the fittings are exactly the same as the Mac, except the hose is a little different, but the hose is the exact same length and whatnot. But it's an old, got the same 14 and 18 on the end. You screw it in the spark plug and turn the engine over. Then we have a snap-on here, which is a little more sophisticated. It has these different hoses on it, so you can use different size spark plugs. And then you just take the compression gauge. You'll take the compression gauge, and you will just use the regular air fitting on it. And it's got a small one, a little bit bigger, and so this one does 10, 12, and 14 millimeter. Like if you on my H2, it uses these, and my Concours, it uses the small one, and then, on other bikes, you use this one. I use this for the different sizes for the most part, because it really doesn't matter all that much. This is, if I need to be super accurate, I will use this guy, but for the most part, these other are just fine. If they're within a few pounds, they're fine. So one thing you need to know is when you're checking compression is you need to make sure that when you have this in, you're getting ready to kick the engine over or turn it over with the starter or whatever you're going to be turning it over with, is that the throttle is wide open. If the throttle isn't open, what you're going to find is that the engine cannot draw air. Let me go find a carburetor. And here we have a carburetor. And if the engine, if you don't turn the throttle, look, there's no air, there's no way for air to get through. So there's nothing to compress. So what you have to do is you have to open up the throttle completely. You got to get the throttle open completely. You turn the throttle, and even in a car, you have to, make sure that the throttle is wide open, the throttle plates are open. And you also have to remember that on like a constant velocity carburetor, you'll see it has a butterfly in the front and there is a slide in the back. Well, you can open up the throttle, but that slide in the back is still all the way down. So you need to be able to get it up if you can, if you want to get a really good accurate read. Now, here's the deal with compression. An engine will run with as low as about 70 pounds. Now, once you get below that, it has trouble. A four-stroke can run maybe a little bit, you know, you might make it to 60, but 70 pounds is a good number. And then up from there, it will run. Now, again, the manufacturer may tell you, oh yeah, it needs to be between 120 and 150. And you say, okay, fine. And you find that you're at 100. Well, there's a whole list of things that it could be that makes it only 100. Could be that the engine's sitting for too long. When they sit for long, the rings get stuck and they don't seal very well, and they need to be run and cleaned out. Sometimes the valves get some dirt on them or do something of that nature, or your throttles aren't open, obviously. So there's a whole bunch of things in there that can happen. Doesn't mean that if your engine isn't up to spec, what you need to do is make sure that the engine is run, it's been clean, and you know, you maybe had to give it an Italian tune-up. So keep those things in mind when you're doing compression. And the next piece of equipment I want to talk about is something called a power probe. Now, this is the actual brand power probe, and this is their Maestro, they call it, which is their super deluxe version of it. Harbor Freight sells the Power Probe 3, and that's the one I'd recommend. It's a little bit less fancy than this, but it does the job very nicely. And there's another one right here, which is a very inexpensive one. It's from Autotool, and it's a BT250, and it does basically the same job, and it does a fairly good job. I like this thing. It's pretty good to use. It's got little lights on it when you want to aim at something and you can probe into something. And I'll do a brief explanation on how these work. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things you can do with it, but basically you can go in and you can inject 12 volts or ground into a circuit to see if something works. So we'll do a quick demonstration on that. The Maestro has all sorts of things. I bought this one because it was has an app that you can put on a computer and you can see the results or it coming out. It broadcasts it to the app and you can see what's going on in there. So what you would want to do in this case, one thing about a power probe, they have to have good power. I mean, they're not a battery tester by any means, but what you do is you just hook it up to 12 volts. And as you can see, it comes up and it says Power Probe Tech, and it tells you your battery voltage and whatnot. Now, the basic functionality of this is it will inject positive or you can inject ground. Okay, and what you want to do is, let's just say you wanted to check this bulb. We got a bulb here, and I'm kind of going around the camera, so you have to excuse me as we go along. And this is a ground probe that comes with it, so you can hook this up to whatever you need, but it does need to be hooked to ground. And to get things to work, let's see if we can get I'm trying to do this where you can see. Okay, so now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to touch one of these leads. I've got this grounded. I'm going to touch one of these leads, and it says there's a good connection there, but watch this. I can go in and I can turn it on. And I can inject the signal. Then I can go to the other side and do the same thing. And so this is your tail light, and here's your brake light, as you can see. Now, one of the things good about this is it goes in and it's measuring resistance. And if you look, let me turn this right side up for you. Where you can see, and you see it says basically 0, and it's measuring the resistance between this probe and this guy, and that tells you that it's good. And again, you can inject 12 volts. This is just for demonstration, but we inject 12 volts. Oops, you get it. And there's your 12 volts on each side of that. Now, if you had power going to this, so let's just say we had 12 volts already going to it, you could do the same thing and inject a ground. That's the basic operation of them. This thing does a whole lot of things. It looks at pulses of, you know, you can look at fuel injector pulses and whatnot. This is a fairly comprehensive meter, and it tells you about AC, DC. There's all sorts of functionality this has, but that's for a whole video all by itself. Okay, so now we're going to switch over to, let me get this out of the way. We'll switch over to this guy, and we're just hooking it up to a battery. And even though this is fairly cheap, it's got really nice clamps on it. Really, really nice. And it does basically the same thing. It comes up and it just tells you there's no voltage going out. And if you were to hit it, you would say it's putting 12.1 out. And if you hit the negative, it's putting 0 out. And it has that same type of alligator clip on it. And we can go on ahead and, I'm trying to make sure you can see it. And it will inject a signal. Whoop. Get things hooked up here. And there's our 12 volts going to the one side. And 12 volts going to the other. Same type of deal. And you push it the other way, you get negative. These are very, very handy because they're also a good meter. I mean, you can go in and we can look from our ground here. We can see what our voltage is. Let's see if I can make it so you can see. Whoop. I'm hitting buttons. And it'll check diodes and do all sorts of good stuff for you, but that's the basic functionality of that. So here's something else that we need to discuss, and this is a battery charger. This particular one is a NOCO Genius 5, and it is a really, really versatile battery charger. NOCO makes quite a few different ones. I think there's a smaller one than this. Well, I know there's a smaller one that does trickle charging. I'll show you that. But what's nice about these, they have kind of a battery repair, and it's a desulfator. And the way a desulfator works is what it does is it puts a kind of a high voltage in there and cuts it off. High voltage, cuts it off. High voltage, cuts it off. About once a second, once every 2 seconds. And that has a tendency to desulfate the battery. And this has that functionality in it. So how you use this is relatively simple. There's not much to it. It's basically obvious. It's a battery charger. And we're just going ahead and we will hook it up. And the charger sees there's something going on there. And then you can hit the mode. And it says, okay, this is going to be a 12 volt, or you just hit the mode again and you get to AGM. And then it'll charge a lithium if you need to, or a 6 volt, or you put it in repair. And now that it's seen that it's a 12 volt AGM, and what it's doing is starting to charge the battery, and it is charging it up. Now the battery, as the battery gets more and more of a charge, these will start, you see it's already gone up to the second one already. And then when it's finally done, it'll hit green. Okay. Then what you can do is reset it, and we'll put it back on. Then what we're going to do is we can put it into another mode for repair. So you hold down the button, and then it goes to 6 volt, hit it again, it goes into repair. And what it's now doing is it is going in and giving this battery like 19 volts and then it shuts it off. 19 volts shuts it off, and it's trying to desulfate it. So that's how that works. So now let's take a quick walk, and we'll go on over here. And I have my concourse plugged in here to a Genius One, and it's a trickle charger. And I just have it. I have it permanently wired, a plug permanently wired in, so that I can just go on ahead. I can just disconnect this. This part stays, and then I can ride the bike. But now this battery won't go south. I don't ride this bike that much these days, so it does end up sitting. And you know, I ride this bike more in the funky weather because it has fairings and things like that. So that's why I've got it set up like that. So it's on a trickle charger, and it works really, really well. And also remember that battery chargers come in many, many, many different flavors. There's the big giant ones you roll around, which have, you know, super starting abilities, and you can get smaller ones in almost any size, shape, or configuration you want. Modern battery chargers work extremely well. So, but you know, it's worth it to have a decent one around. It really, really is. So always consider that. So here's another tester that is really, really, really handy. And this is just your basic battery tester. And if you have a lot of old motorcycles like I do, and a lot of times, you know, or somebody will bring something to you and you're trying to get it running, you need to find out the condition of the battery. This is a Topdon, and there's many, many brands out there, but Topdon seems to have some really good ones. This is a relatively inexpensive one because I just do motorcycles, and it gives you a good idea what's going on. They have far better ones that are far more comprehensive, but this one works good. So how this works in general is you go on and you just hook it up to a battery. So you just hook up, there's only 2 leads, there's nothing special going on here. It will turn on. And it gives us our battery voltage. And this battery's been sitting for a long time, but it's a decent battery. And so what I'm going to do here is you hit OK. And then I'm going to just do the battery test. You can do a cranking test, a charging test. There's all sorts of different functionality, but this is just going to give you an idea of how you can do a battery test. So you hit OK. We're going to do a battery test. And this is an AGM flat plate, and you can do AGM spiral, you can do a gel, and an EFB, or regular flooded. And you just pick the right one. It makes the readings more accurate. Then you go OK, and then it says CCA. CCA means cold cranking amps, so your battery has got a specific listing for that. And in this particular case, I know that this happens to be 160, so I've already got it set to 160. You can change it how you need to, but this is supposed to be 160. And you go OK, and all of a sudden it'll just go testing. And it gives you a quick report of your battery. It says the health is 100%. It has 163 cold cranking amps. It says the charge is only at 40% because it's been sitting for a long time, but it's a good battery. It's rated at 160, so you've got a good battery, and it just tells you if it's a good battery, or it'll tell you to replace the battery or whatever. Go OK, and then it brings you back to the main menu. And if you have a battery with a regular old lead acid battery, these testers will measure the electrolyte in there. And if you look, you can see there's little balls in there. And what ends up happening is when a battery is dead, none of these balls will float. And as the charge comes up, they start to float, and you'll get one to float, and then have somewhat of a charge. And when they all float, hey, you've got a charged up battery. You know, most new batteries are sealed up, so this is not one of those things you use a lot anymore, but it will tell you, you know, about your battery if you have one. So another really, really handy tool to have is a way to be able to measure things. You want to know the size of a bolt, you want to know the size of the head of a nut or anything, or a piece of shaft, or, you know, just whatever. You get yourself a set of Vernier calipers. Now you can get these at Harbor Freight, you can get them at Amazon, you can get, you know, really inexpensive one. This is a relatively inexpensive one. I think I got it on sale for like $12 or something like that. But that was a while ago. So, you know, but 20 bucks will get you one of these. And basically these things work. And in this particular instance, they work when you can turn them on and off. Then you can zero it out, and then it is a very accurate way to measure things. And even the cheap ones are really, really accurate. Again, this is a Harbor Freight version of it. It's a, I guess it doesn't even have a brand on it, but it's stainless steel hardened. I've got multiple sets of these. I've got an expensive Mitsutoyo, and I've got an old set of Craftsman, which are just, you know, I just love those old things. But, you know, for everyday use, I use these cheap ones. If I drop it and something bad happens to it, it's no big deal. And these are pretty good. They have kind of an auto shut off if you need it. They're pretty decent. So a good thing to have. And here's another flavor of a Vernier caliper. And this is just the manual version of it. And you read it by looking at, you know, how many millimeters or inches it is, and they're both inches and millimeters, and then you can figure out very accurately what the size of something is. And there are all sorts of other measuring devices, and this is called a dial indicator, and this is a digital version of it, which you can get pretty much everywhere. And basically what it is it measures how far this little plunger moves. And let's just say you're gonna measure how far a piston moves up and down. You can, you know, find a way to clamp this in and go through the spark plug hole, or put a little extension rod on it, and I've got another one that does that. And you can watch when you get to top dead center and back down. And you can also measure run out with this. So let's just say you're trying to, you know, balance a crankshaft or do something. You hook this up onto some sort of holder, and you can see the run out of something. You can watch it go up and down. These are inexpensive, but they can come in really handy when you do need to measure something like that. Here's another flavor of that. This is the regular dial indicator, and it again measures what goes up and down. I've got a few different flavors of these too, but this gives you an idea. Like in this particular case, if you want to do a spark plug, you screw this into a spark plug hole. You get a little shaft on it. There's a little extension. These little extension shafts, you screw right into them. And that gets you down into the piston. And you can watch the piston come up and then come back down. And you can find top dead center and measure how far the piston has moved. On older two-strokes, these are indispensable. And another handy tool is something called a micrometer. And a micrometer is a device where you can actually measure things very, very, very accurately, down to the thousandths of an inch or a hundredth of a millimeter. You can go in and you just, like, well, let's see if I can just, you know, I'm going to do something that's about the right size. I got to get something that fits in here. Just. And let's just say you wanted to measure this guy, and you just take it and you just roll this in, and there's a little ratchet wheel on there. And then you can go in and read that this is 41.1 millimeters across. And it's a good way to measure it. The Vernier caliper does the same kind of thing. This is for super accurate measurements. And so now the next thing we're going to cover is meters. And as you can see, there's a whole selection here. I've got even more than this, but, you know, over the years, I've collected different things. I was an engineer at IGT for many, many years, so I did a lot of electronic work, so I've always had to have good meters. So anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss just some basics on these types of meters and what you might want to use to have at home. You do not need to have any selection like this at all. This is just some examples of the different types so you can think about it. So the first thing that we need to talk about here are what we call digital multimeters. This is a Fluke 15B. This is not a real expensive one for a Fluke. I mean, it's not cheap, but it's not super expensive. And it has some basic functionality. It can read DC voltage, AC voltage. That's that little swervy line. That means AC. That means alternating current. So it goes high, low. And then there's DC, which is always going to be either at one level or always above. It will never go negative. It will always stay in the positive for the most part. And then this has got millivolts. And then there's something called ohms, and that is the resistance between things. And in this one has a capacitor checker, and it can also look at current going through. A fuse is rated in amperes, and you can measure those amps using a meter like this. And most meters have this. Here is another digital meter. This is another Fluke. This is an older model. Basically, it has the same thing. It just a little less sophisticated. It doesn't have a capacitor check on it like the newer ones do, but it's just another one. And this is another high quality meter. This is made by Tektronix. Tektronix is a very, very high-end oscilloscope multimeter test equipment company. They build some of the very best test equipment out there. And it just, it's got a nice big display on it with a lot of different things in it, AC, DC, and it does all sorts of things. It can measure frequencies. It does capacitors. This is a relatively high-end meter. And here is yet another Fluke. This is one of their first really, really big selling meters. They are, this one here was a really, really expensive at the time. It was, 30 some odd years ago, it was hundreds of dollars. Just an example of a different meter. And this is a very, very useful meter. This is a meter that comes from Harbor Freight. It's a very inexpensive meter. It's probably the cheapest one that they have. I think that, I've seen them on sale for as little as $5. And when they're for $5, I buy 2 or 3 of them so I can go put them in different toolkits. But this one here has a lot of functionality. It measures AC volts. It measures DC volts, but it has a very, very good battery checking feature. And we're not talking about your motorcycle battery. We're talking about batteries like, your AA batteries in flashlights and a 9-volt battery. This thing has a really good system to check that. You can put a 1.5 volt on it, and then it gives you a read of 4.0 milliamps. And if it's close to that, you've got a good battery. The only thing wrong with this meter, and they last a long time, and they use 9-volt batteries. The leads are very, very fragile, and they're not very good. But if you take care of the leads, and you can buy leads, and these work with standard leads out there, you can have a meter that works really well for almost no money. And here's another type of meter. I don't have any leads on it at the moment, but this is more of a engine analyzer. It still does voltage, but it's always in DC. It has an ohm meter in it so that you can check the different, resistance on things, for checking coils and things like that. There's a diode check in it for checking diodes and rectifiers and whatnot. But also has a tachometer in it, which is kind of cool for a 4-cylinder, 5-cylinder, 6-cylinder, and 8-cylinder cars. But sometimes motorcycles, because they run off the crankshaft and not divided down with a camshaft, you can use the 4-cylinder on a 2-cylinder and it'll read right. It's just some things. And then it also has some dwell settings on it, and that's dwell is basically an angle that they calculate and how long points stay open for to then it's how long they stay open versus how long they stay closed. And when they're closed, that's the coil charging, and then when they break. So you have to have enough time for the coil to recharge itself. And that's what dual is about. That's, you know, basically when you use points. And now we have a analog meter. And an analog meter means it doesn't have a digital display. It has a needle that swings. And you can measure voltages, and there are different scales, and you can measure ohms. And it has just basically voltage and ohms, and it can read amperes, you know, 10 amps, and you have to hook it up a little bit differently, but that's for a whole different discussion. But this is an analog meter. It has resistance, and you can measure things. A lot of people like these. You know, they're very, very good meters. They've been around for a long time. This one's kind of cool because this is a Suzuki meter, which is completely unobtainium, but it's an interesting meter. And this is another type of meter, and it's called a point checker, and it has a very, very limited range. Its whole range is only about 10 ohms, if that. It's made for points hooked up to a condenser, so you can actually see when the points open and close. Again, these are completely unobtainium. It's just an example of things that are out there. And here we have something called a voltage probe. This is a simplistic item. It's got 2 leads on it, and it just measures voltage. And we'll turn it on, and it shows 0 volts. And we're going to hook it up to a battery. Here's the negative side, and we'll just take a look at it and make sure we can see. Yep. And it shows 12.28 volts. Very simple. It doesn't have any other functionality other than that. It just has that functionality. And if you just need something like that, it's very easy because you can kind of poke around inside and be able to look at it. You know, again, you have to be able to see it. Sometimes if you're working on something that's way inside and you can't see the thing, that's why a meter sometimes can be a better choice. Here's a different version of that. This has got a few more functions in it. It's got some ohm meter stuff in it, but for the most part, it does the same job. So we'll just turn it on, and it's reading. It's a little hard to see. This is not a very expensive one, but it's reading 0 volts. So we'll just do the same thing with it, and we can go on ahead, and it reads. I get a good connection here. 12.28 volts. So it does the same type of thing. Again, this is another deal where if you're poking around in something, you can't even see what's going on inside. So that's just another one. And again, we have another voltage type probe. Hook it up to negative and positive. This has got, as you can see, and it's reading 12.2 volts. It's again, very simplistic, but it's a good probe. You can see if you've got voltage going on, you can see what's going on with it. Again, it's simplistic. And here's another one. This is your basic, it's just got a little light inside. And this is an old Snap-on that I bought, oh, geez, probably, again, you can see it's got the old Snap-on logo on it. So it's probably 30, 40 years old, maybe even more than that. And you know, this was usually the most popular thing. And you just hook it up to our battery, and it just tells you, hey, it works. That's it. And if you hook it up backwards, it doesn't matter because it's just a bulb in there, and that bulb just works. So however you hook it up, it works. Simplistic. So now we have some other types of gauges. These are what you call vacuum gauges, and you use these to synchronize carburetors. And you can do 4 carburetors, and what will happen is you hook them up to all 4 on your intake port, or 2 if you want to do a double. You can, or just 1 to see how much vacuum you have. But you hook them up, you get all 4, and then there's this little adjustment here is for nothing more than stopping the meter from wiggling around too much. It makes it easier to read. And Those you can synchronize carburetors with it. Then you have these here, which are mercury sticks. And mercury is bad news, as we know, as everybody knows now. But way back when, that's what we had. Now there are these types of sticks are still available, but they have a different chemical in them. It's some blue stuff that you can use to get these to show up. Pretty neat stuff. So the next thing we have is a timing light, and this is a snap-on, and there are many brands out there. All of the brands are pretty good. These are called advanced timing lights, and what that means is that the light will flash, and there's a mark that you'll be able to look at, and when you look at that mark, you can adjust this thing to do some advancing for you. So what you want to do is, all you need to know is top dead center. So if your bike or your car doesn't have anything, you find top dead center, you mark it, and then you can go in and set this to the amount of advance you want. And you just, when that lines up on the top dead center mark, because it will advance the light flashing in the right amount. That needs a whole other explanation, but that's just your basics on it. Okay, and another very handy thing to have is a tire inflator. This one's a rechargeable tire inflator, and this one's made by Fantic, and Fantic makes some pretty good stuff, actually. So the way you use this is you turn it on, and it's set to, in this case, you can set it to whatever you want. You can have it like a bicycle, car, motorcycle. It shows a little scooter on it, but hey, and then it shows a little ball for like a basketball. So you can have these different settings for, so if a car would be 36, and then for your bike, this particular one, we'll set it for 36, whatever it's going to be. And when you're ready to go, all that you do is you hit the button. Well, suppose, I'll wait for it to go to 0, and then well, there it goes. And it will fill the tire up to what you set it and shut off automatically. This one's got a little light in it too, so if at night or whatever you need to see what's going on, there's a little light. I think you have to turn it on, and then yeah, if you look, there's a light. Kind of cool. But anyway, handy to have. And if you don't have an air compressor and you need to, to work on stuff, at least you can fill tires. And now we have something called a tire gauge. Now there's multiple types of tire gauges out there. This particular one, you hook it up. There's a hose, and you hook it up to your tire, and it has a digital display on it telling you the poundage on it, and it's pretty cool stuff. This one's okay. This is not a poor quality one. It's a decent quality. It seems to be fairly accurate, and is very inexpensive and very convenient. You just hook it up, and you can turn on the air with it and get your tire to pump up, get to the right pressure, and you're done. Very simple. And so this is just a regular tire gauge. You just basically put it onto the valve stem, and it tells you your tire pressure, and you go to whatever's recommended. Very simplistic. This particular one's fairly accurate. It's a Blue Point, which is Snap-on product, so it works real well. I've had this for many years, and it just works fine. And I've checked it against other meters, and if you have a bunch of other meters, you can get an average and find out if something's way off. But few of them are way off. The only one I've ever seen it was way off was I bought one from Harbor Freight one time. That was just terrible. But other than that, never had a problem with them. And here we have another tire gauge. It's a filler, and so you hook up your air to this, and you put this on your valve stem. And I'm going to try and do this so we can see. And this little plunger comes out, and it's got a lot of spring pressure on it, but it has how many pounds are there. So the 2 is showing at the moment. So it's just got a lot of pressure on it for me to do that with one hand. But that's just another type. Here's another type, and again, you just put this on your valve stem. You can fill the tire, and you get a reading on this gauge. When I got this, it was highly inaccurate. It wasn't even close, and I kind of messed around with it and made it closer, so you had to be careful. Some of them can be really bad. So that is your basic list of the types of meters, measuring devices, things you can have around the shop. Again, none of these are in great detail. Some of them are just dead obvious that everybody knows how they work. Some people have never seen some of this stuff before, so we'll just put that in there. So in the future, we will be going through and on the more complicated ones, we're going to go into an in-depth usage of them, how they're used on a motorcycle, what you can use them for in other things. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and like, and we'll see you next time here on GearHeadGeeks.